Big tech executives from Microsoft, Google, and Meta testified before the Senate Intelligence Committee about foreign attempts from Russia and China to disrupt and influence the U.S. presidential election. Joining us now is Joe Lonsdale, Palantir co-founder and founding partner of 8VC.
Can you really go to jail for a tweet? This heated debate on free speech and government control is something you need to see. Check this video out.
Whenever you're on, I can think of 10 different ways to take this. I will say, just in terms of free speech, which you've been a big advocate for, and the slippery slope that maybe we find ourselves on. In the UK, can you go to jail for tweeting something is that really?
No, this is very scary. And I love that you're asking about this because I think it's crazy our press isn't talking about it more. The birthplace of liberty in the West. You can now go to jail for tweeting against the left and for complaining about Muslim terrorists or Muslim culture or all sorts of other issues that they're dealing with there. It's crazy.
Because of hate crimes? What are they?
They're hate crimes, and who gets to decide what hate crimes are? The government gets to decide, right? And that's what Tim Walz and Kamala Harris have said they want to be able to decide here too. And I'm sorry, that's against the First Amendment. Thank goodness we have protections like that here in America.
The problem isn't just censorship. It's who holds the power to decide what can and cannot be said. When governments take control of speech, they take control of public thought. This is why strong, independent tech companies must push back against overreach. The fight for free expression is only getting more urgent.
It's a movement. It's not just that. I saw former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton yesterday talking about, in her, I think she was claiming that Russia is she's still fixated on Russia, but Russia is once again sowing a lot of misinformation that's not factual, and maybe it is against the law. I don't know. In the current elections, he said they will never be held to account in Russia, and we need to hold them into account here. For some reason, I immediately thought PP tapes and Steele dossiers, and who funded those? And is she going to turn herself in?
Except for that interference, like if we have a foreign government, whether it be China or
Russia. Well, that was interference that she funded, and so is she going to turn herself in?
She definitely funded interference on the other side. Listen, Iran is very clearly working against Trump. They've broken in. This is on record. They've broken into his campaign. They're sending the information to the New York Times. They're sending it to the Harris campaign. Listen, there's different state actors who want different people to win. But, I mean, California this week, Gavin Newsom just signed into law a new law, which is a totally unconstitutional law that says these parody AI videos are illegal. And everyone's sharing them anyway. It's actually kind of fun to share something against the state.
I do have concerns, though, when it gets to AI and what might be used to try and sway the electorate right before an election. I don't know which state actors are coming after it, but let's take this to the next level. What do you think about TikTok and the idea that they are using First Amendment as a reason that you should have foreign ownership? Judges asked some pretty probing questions of them, including, well, if that's the case, why should we be allowed to say that a foreign entity can't own a broadcast company here either?
Yeah, well, no. So, listen, I agree that you don't want a foreign entity having root access to a platform that has tens of millions or hundreds of millions of Americans on it. That's too dangerous. And there's no reason to give them.
The rush to ban AI-generated content in California is a clear overreach, especially when politicians and media figures have a history of spreading falsehoods themselves. If free speech is to mean anything, it must apply equally to everyone. Instead, we're watching selective censorship disguised as election security.
It doesn't seem like a First Amendment issue. You're not saying the Americans can't say this.
It's not first. Listen, for TikTok to be able to choose to make certain things go viral, to say we want America to be dysfunctional, we're going to have more socialist stuff go viral, we're going to have more of these other things go viral, we're going to figure out what works to convince these naive kids and spread it around. I agree. There's no reason to give foreign actors that kind of access. I think that's a different question than whether or not the government gets to decide what American citizens can say and can spread themselves.
Okay. That's a fair distinction.
Yeah.
Is the target on the back of big tech gotten? I mean, is it worse than it was a year or two ago? And I'll tell you where I'm going. And I can see how it could get even worse. We had Senator Elizabeth Warren on talking about, actually, it was margins in the grocery industry that she was saying we need price controls for. And I didn't want to throw tech under the bus, but what is a decent margin? What's NVIDIA's margins right now?
No, of course.
Is it 70%? Is that okay?
The conversation around big tech has shifted, but the goal remains the same: more control over what information reaches the public. Politicians will attack corporations when it's convenient, but have no problem using them to push their own agendas. This isn't about fairness, it's about power.
I mean, tech does have a lot higher margins than groceries. I think you need to in order to work on these and build these things. But I get it. There's some basic monopolies that you guys have all the numbers all around the room. $3 billion here, $3 trillion companies here, $2 trillion companies here. Those are where the biggest margins are in the world. I think these companies have a lot of power. I think that's okay to have that power if they're not abusing consumers. But that's the place to look, obviously, versus grocery.
And the EU's looking there, and I'm just wondering what finally.
Yeah, the problem is you got to be really careful. Listen, again, I always teach people I'm not a big tech guy, right? I start companies all the time. We build companies, and big tech likes to crush new companies. So I tend to be on the side of small tech, not big tech. That said, if you make lots of really crazy rules, as the EU has, you're going to block the development of AI. You're going to block the development of small tech as well. And Europe has. They've crushed that. And, Europe might be going back the right direction. Thierry Breton, I think they forced him to resign. This is the crazy guy who wanted to censor Elon Musk from interviewing Trump. There's all sorts of terrible AI rules that I think Meta just wrote to the European Union along with others saying you guys are crushing everything here. So, maybe they're waking up and they're not going to do it. And I think it's actually a better direction for them to regulate this less versus regulating this more.
Blocking innovation in the name of regulation doesn't level the playing field. It hands the advantage to other countries. If Europe doesn't change course, they'll fall even further behind in AI, startups, and next-gen technology.
Do you think at this point that the goose that lays all these golden eggs is at risk, Silicon Valley? And I don't know whether it's from unrealized capital gains or whether there's money. It's like Willie Sutton. There's a lot of money there that the government would probably like to get at.
Listen, Joe, it's very easy to break the innovation economy, right? So when I was at PayPal as a kid, there were multiple times when Spitzer here in New York almost took it out. He came very close to taking it out, right? He was trying to regulate it as a bank. He was trying to do all sorts of other nonsense to harass us. If he had succeeded, we would not have Tesla. We would not have LinkedIn. We would not have YouTube. We would not have SpaceX. We would not have so many companies that came out of that. And that's what happened in the EU. In the EU, the regulators were just a little more powerful, just a little more obnoxious. And all of a sudden, there's dozens of companies that would have existed that don't. So I think you got to be very, very careful. Like the government, people, to give them a little more power, and yes, you can smash these things. And there's one side trying to do that. We got to make sure they don't.
Silicon Valley's strength comes from risk-taking and disruption. If government interference had been stronger 20 years ago, many of today's biggest tech giants wouldn't exist. Overregulation punishes innovators, rewards bureaucrats, and ultimately hands the advantage to countries willing to take risks.
What happens to a company like Apple when you're a worldwide company? You have to operate in these markets, or do you pull out? I mean, you can't not operate in these markets given the revenue that they're bringing in. But what they are asking you to do is basically rip apart your system, open it up, and Apple's defense, I think, would be that they don't think that's secure.
No, again, it's not really Apple I'm worried about, of course, because they're worth $3 trillion. So if the EU hurts them a little bit, they'll probably be fine. But because they're making all these rules, the next thing that would have competed with Apple, that's smashed even more. And then that's the really sad thing here is it's not. I don't feel badly for these giant tech companies. Sure, you have to treat them fairly, but I feel badly for the new ones that would have existed that don't. And that's what we really shouldn't be messing up.
The more governments tighten their grip, the more innovation slips through their fingers. While big tech can afford armies of lawyers and compliance teams, the next generation of startups simply can't. The EU's regulations aren't just about Apple. They're about all the companies that would have existed but now won't. If we want real competition and progress, we need policies that support new players, not just ones that tinker with the existing giants.